Hello. So this video is, I'm just going to share some of my Reiki stories with you. Usually in the classroom setting, they just kind of pop into my head. So I was just started to do a video a little bit ago and I was like, I can't think of a single one. So I've just spent like 10 minutes just remembering some of the magic moments and stuff that I could share them with you. So I wrote them down because I do forget and I just want to make sure that I get them all across to you. So it's just about the feedback. So I've mentioned feedback before, and these stories are just about the feedback that you keep getting this feedback that eventually you can't argue with it, and you kind of like faith is created completely by itself or by this feedback. So much feedback to the point. So if you're into science and stuff like that, and you keep getting white feathers and stuff like that, you reach a point where you're like, okay, I'm listening. There's feathers for me, and you kind of get it. And it's exactly the same thing with the magic of Reiki. Is the feedback. You should just keep doing it, keep exploring, playfully explore with it, because Reiki is the biggest teacher. I am literally a guide. I am literally setting you in the right direction, and the playing and exploring that you do and what the Reiki teaches you, that is the real learning. That's the real experience. So let me share a couple of stories with you. Well, there's more than a couple, but some of my Reiki stories. So I'm going to start off with my dad. So my dad will never have a Reiki session. He did actually, I think he did once. He might have done once, but generally I'll ask him and he's like, no, not having one. But there was a time when we were living together. Well, I was living at my mum and dad's, and I was way into my Reiki. I was just coming back to life after being really ill, and I was like waking my Reiki back up. I was doing a lot of distance healing. And I've already told you in another video about, he used to have this wooden box that he'd sit on in the garden, and I would Reiki his wooden box and then watch him. And this is the feedback, is actually watching him sitting down and kind of being like this and then going, and you could literally see that like change in him, and that was the feedback. So another time we were just all sat together in the living room watching TV or whatever, and I was just like, because at this time when we all lived together, my dad wasn't very well either. So I call it the dodgy Scotland gene, because my dad, me, and my son all have these issues with mitochondria. So anyway, I would always like just not root around in his energy. So I'm not breaking any permission, but I would always just kind of like radiate energy to him, or like the box create that little blast of energy for him. And one of the times we were sat in the living room, I was just literally sitting there and I was just like holding his face and just like let him just like be filled and recharged again. And I'm sat watching him, and this is the feedback. He's kind of from being really slumped to coming up again. And then at this point, he turns around and he looks over at me and he's like, you're doing that thing, aren't you? Stop it now, that's enough. He's like my cat, and the cat's exactly the same. The cat will come for Reiki, and then he'll be like, right, I've had enough now. That's all I need. Riley, my grandson, is exactly the same. I've just thought of another story, actually. So one of the days, Riley wasn't well, and I went round, and he just literally was just like cuddling up to me for about an hour and a half, just literally cuddling up. So I'm obviously like, even not intentionally, but I'm cuddling him and just like holding him in all this space of healing. And then after a certain point of time, he just got up and started dancing around the living room. He'd not been well for a couple of days. He just started dancing around the living room. He's like, that's enough now, Nanny, thank you. And off he goes again. And this is the feedback that I'm trying to get across to you. This is the feedback that you want to start looking for and tuning into, because it's this feedback that really grows your faith in this magic. It's not just magic and make believe. It's like it's real, and the more feedback you get, the more real you realize that it actually is, to the point where you just can't argue with it anymore. So on the note of Riley, so when my daughter Jodie was pregnant in labour, she'd been in labour for, like, she texted me early on in the day and she was like, I think this might be it, Mum. So she'd just been uncomfortable all day. We got to about 6 o'clock, and then she started having like regular contractions. She took 2 cocodamol, and we spent the whole time, she was leaning over a chair and I just had my hands on her back, and I'd go for a wee. So it's not about the whole experience, it's these little bits. So I'd go for a wee And she'd be like, Mom, hurry up, come back, come back, come back. And I'd come back and put my hands on her again. And she'd be like, oh, it was the relief in like possibly the most painfulest time in the world. It was the relief that she was getting. And it wasn't even so much the relief as I had my hands on her. It was notice. It was like as I took my hands off and went for a wee or went to get her a drink or whatever, it was then that she was like, the agony came back. So the feedback sometimes comes that way. So if you do self-healing every day and then you take 2 days off, you might not notice in them 5 days how amazing that you're starting to feel. But what you will notice is on the 2 days off, when you don't do it, then you start to really notice that you're missing something. And so this is the thing in feedback as well. It's not just the feedback you get when you're doing it, it's the feedback you get when you're not doing it. Does that make sense? So that leads me nicely to a story on my mum and Reiki. So I'll just tell you the whole story with my mum. When I first got into Reiki, my mum was like, it's something really weird. She didn't know what it was. I didn't even really know what it was. I just knew that it made me feel better. And she was like, oh, be careful with that stuff, Lou, be careful with that stuff. And anyway, just over time, I think as she saw what it did with me, she started to get a bit interested, and she was like, go on then, I'll have a go at this. I think she had earache. I think the first time she ever had Reiki, she had earache. I might be making this up. She's had loads of Reiki recently in the last few years, but at the beginning, she was quite wary of it. Anyway, the first time she had Reiki, she was hooked. She absolutely loved it. So my mum now will text me and she'll be like, Claire, I need your healing hands. Or can you send me some Reiki, please? Or have you got time to give me some Reiki? So she now actively asks for it. My mum feels the benefits of the Reiki. She knows when she needs it. And my mum's just been kind of on the outside of my journey. So I think I've mentioned this before about as we grow and radiate Reiki out, other people are kind of like, whoa, what's changed with you? I want a bit of that. In the most gorgeous way possible. So yeah, my mum, I can't remember when this was, but I set up right, every morning as soon as I wake up, I'm gonna set, so back to distant healing, I would only spend a minute, but in that minute I would set for my mum to receive 10 minutes of Reiki every morning as she woke up. We'll go into this with the distant healing symbol and setting times, but I just want to share the magic with you. And over, I think it was about a month, maybe a couple of months, and over that period there was days where maybe I woke up rough myself and so I didn't send it, or just days where I forgot, where life is so calm of a morning now. It's kind of, I have time to wake up and chill. But back then life was chaotic. So some mornings I'd be up and someone had missed the bus, so I had to drive them to college or school or whatever. And I'd missed the morning session. Now it was fascinating because my mum always knew the days that I'd missed it. So I'd text her, I'd be like, I'm just going to send you a blast now. I missed it this morning. She'd be like, I knew it. I knew I felt different this morning. And then another couple of times she'd message me and she'd be like, did you send Reiki this morning? It didn't feel like you did. I'd be like, no, I didn't get a chance to yet. So again, that is feedback. That is that feedback that I keep going on about, is that you notice when you don't have it or do it as well, which is amazing feedback. Let me check my other stories for you. I love Reiki stories. Back to my dad. So, oh my goodness, this is my most recent and most amazing healing session, Reiki story, whatever. So my dad had his heart surgery earlier this year, and on the Sunday night, he was on like cloud cuckoo land. He wasn't present at all. He was very delirious, and I'd gone for a healing session. So I had just had sepsis at like a couple. I got out of the hospital the day or two before my dad went into hospital for his surgery. So I was absolutely on the floor at this point. I had nothing to give myself. And so I booked in with a gorgeous lady for some healing. And she was saying about like, you've got to get you right. This is what I preach about all the time. It's not because I just make it up or I read it in a book. It's because I've experienced it myself. So I was on the floor post sepsis. I didn't get into septic shock. It was sepsis. So it's not like everyone goes, oh, sepsis. It was like, it wasn't sepsis shock. I was on sepsis shock watch for 12 hours. But while we are on about sepsis, let me remember where I was going. Right, okay, this is another one I've just thought of. So let's go back a week before my dad's story then. So I went into hospital on the Sunday night. I've been ill for a whole week. I just thought I was having a really bad crash. Nothing really was much different than a really bad crash, like a crash and burn. So anyway, on the Sunday, got into hospital. They did a blood test, and it was just like panic. It was all like, I was surrounded by loads of people, all this stuff on me. It was quite a traumatic time. They put me straight on IV antibiotics, and it took until 7 o'clock the next morning. They'd kind of like brought my body back down enough to go on a ward, but not enough to come off the IV antibiotics. So this is the Sunday. The Monday morning. On the Tuesday night, they kept taking blood tests, and she was like, it's not coming down. Now, bear in mind, I know I should be like focus on my healing, but my dad was about to go for heart surgery, and I was like, I need to get home. I didn't want my entire family worried about me in hospital and my dad in hospital at the same time. I just wanted to get home and recover from home, so that was one less worry for the whole family, because we were worried. My dad was going in for heart surgery. So anyway, on the Tuesday, she came up to me, and I was like, this is going to work. And I hadn't told, no one knew I was in hospital apart from my family. I hadn't put it on Facebook or anything. I hadn't even thought to reach out to all my gorgeous friends and say, like, send me healing. I just was on this little battle in myself. And on the Tuesday night, she came back. And as I walked back to my bed, the nurse was there, and she was like, I'm sorry, it's not shifted. And this infection level would not shift, and it wouldn't shift down enough for me to then come off IV antibiotics and just go on oral. And that was the point I could go home. So I had a little paddy, I had a breakdown. I had like this half an hour of, and then I just put on Facebook, I was like, right, okay, I need your help, guys. I've got sepsis and I need my levels to come down. Can you help? And so many people jumped on that post and was like sending healing and sending Reiki. And friends messaged me like, I'm doing a real-time distant Reiki now. So they were sending as I received. And the very next morning, on the Wednesday morning, the nurse who'd been on this journey with me, she knew that my dad was going in for surgery and everything. And she came like dancing in. She's like, Claire, your levels have dropped. And now I promise you, from that Tuesday night when I posted, I had had one more IV antibiotics. Now, bear in mind, since the Monday morning when I went onto the ward, my levels, they steadied, but they just would not come down enough. And on the Tuesday night, so I'd been having IV antibiotics the whole way through. And on the Tuesday night, overnight, they started to come down. Now, I don't believe in coincidence. I know with all of my heart and being that was all the Reiki and the distant and the healing. And on, I think the Wednesday or Thursday morning anyway, I got to go home just before my dad went into hospital. So back to this story. My dad had his operation on the Friday. And on the Monday, I went in for a healing session. It was a gifted session as well. This lady was in training and she wanted someone to practice and give feedback. So I willingly, desperately volunteered. And she was talking about self-care, filling your cup up and focusing on my healing right now. That was what was needed. So I was like, okay. And so I had this session. And during the session, there was just this point where I was overflowing. I was overflowing so much with this blissful healing and energy and just gorgeousness that I asked the universe or my guides, and I was like, can I just allow this to overflow to my dad? And the lady just said to me about focusing on my healing. So I was like a little girl being like, is it okay, universe? And anyway, I got a big astounding yes. I can overflow. And so what I did is, in my mind's eye, I was just stood by my dad's bed. My dad was in intensive care. I hadn't seen him because you couldn't even visit. It was Rona. I just visualized being stood by his bed, not messing with his energy, so I didn't need permission. And I just literally, I allowed this overflow that I had within me of love and healing energy to shower over my dad. And then I came back out of my healing, and that was that. And you wouldn't think any more of it. Apart from that night, I was staying with my mum while my dad was in hospital. And that night, my dad hadn't rang anyone since we spoke to him, or we spoke to hospital on the Saturday morning, on the Friday that his operation was done, and he was out of that and stuff. but he couldn't work his phone out or anything. And anyway, on the Monday night, I told my mum as well, when I got home from my appointment, I was like, oh my God, this happened. And I went and like overflowed it all to my dad. And I'm so glad I told my mum that as well, because later on that night, my dad, out of the blue, FaceTimed my phone, completely out of the blue. He doesn't even know how to do that. And I was like, hiya, Dad, are you okay? And he went, oh, you were there today, wasn't you? I seen you by my bed today. And I was just like, and me and my mum were just both like, but that again is feedback. That is like, my dad was in cloud cuckoo land. He doesn't even remember it. He didn't know that I'd done that healing, that overflow or anything. But somewhere amongst that like delirium that my dad was in, he managed to phone me, FaceTime me, and just saying that I was in the room with him today. And I don't believe in coincidence. So it could be coincidence, but I don't believe in coincidence. So that's another one of my feedback stories. I don't know how long we've been going for here. I'm sorry if this is a long one, but it's all good, and there's learning in all of it. So yeah, so that was a couple of Reiki stories all in one. Another one, oh, my friend Carla. So ages and ages ago, she came with me. She was one of my first, one of the first couple of group trainings that I did. Carla came along. So she got into the Reiki practice, and she'd put on Facebook something about having a really shitty day, or I can't remember the details. But what I kept doing throughout the day, she kept popping into my head, and this might happen with you, with other people, is they'll just keep popping into your head and you'll be thinking about them. So while you're thinking about them, you may as well send them some love or a blast or hold them in that gorgeousness for a minute. And so I'd just been doing that all day throughout the day, just in my own little space. And anyway, I was speaking to her that night. I was like, everything all right? And da da da. And she's like, have you been sending me that Reiki stuff? Because I've been getting blasts of your energy all throughout the day. And I knew it was yours because I could feel the Reiki, but I felt like you were in the room with me. So yeah, that's another story that, again, it's that feedback. She said, oh, I have so much faith in this. I can, and this is only like a tiny weeny selection of the stories that I could share with you. But it's that feedback, and that feedback builds up faith. So keep exploring, keep experimenting, keep building up that feedback. Let me see if there's any which other ones I was going to share. Jodie, did I finish telling you about Jodie in labour? Unsure. I'll tell you again. Anyway, I don't think I did finish telling you. So anyway, by 10 p.m, we were getting her to the hospital. She'd only had 2 crocodile and Reiki. And then Riley was born at like 10:36. There was no time for anything else. So she literally gave birth to our first child on Reiki and 2 crocodile. If I'm repeating myself, I'm sorry. But I think that was just wrapping up a story that I started with at the beginning. Oh, here's another story. So Bloomy, one of my best friends, Bloomy, I've got 2 stories with Bloomy. I've got millions, but 2 that are relevant for feedback and learning. So after he first did his Reiki 2 training, and we were talking about love bombs and blasting energy, and as we go into symbols, like leaving symbols about, and he did this, he rang me one day and he's like, oh my God, Claire, I'm in our teapot and I've done the love blasting thing. So I've just like, he went in the cafe and just kind of in his mind's eye even, he just blasted all the little seats, not rooting in anyone's energy. So it's okay, we don't need permission. He just literally sent good energy to all the seats in our teapot, which is a gorgeous little cafe just down the road from the studio. And anyway, the fascinating bit was he sat down having his brew, and then he watched people just come into the cafe and sit down in the chairs. And that for him was major, major feedback, because it wasn't just one person like my dad with the box, and you see it in him. He saw everybody in the cafe just kind of have this, it's all good and it's all love and it's all okay. So this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about that we don't need permission for. But this is absolutely the best kind of thing for getting that feedback. So the other story with Bloomy is he was round here one night. We'd done, I think it might have been Reiki Masters, and we were sat outside and we had the fire lit, and the fire literally started dancing, and it was Bloomy. He was just playing with the energy, and he was fired up because he'd just had an attunement, and he was literally controlling the fire with his energy. It was magic. I've always played with fire since I was little with my hands, not literally in the fire, but making it dance with my hands. So yeah, that was amazing feedback. So give that one a go. If you've got a roaring fire lit, do not stick your hands in it. But just use your hands and see if you can guide that fire energy with it. It's amazing feedback. A candle is just the same. So you can sit with a candle in front of you and just use your hands and guide the energy of the candle. This is all the kind of Reiki plays that you play with and you experiment and you explore, and it really builds up that feedback. Let me check if there are any more. There's loads, there's absolutely loads, but I could go on forever, and I don't know how long this video is already. But I am just going to tell you one final one for now, and that is my Reiki journey. So I have a deficiency in life force energy, a physical deficiency, mitochondria, within the physical body. No clue where it was. I was undiagnosed and happened to go to this gorgeous little tiny weeny festival purely for a rest. I was so exhausted. I had 3 little kids at the time on my own, school, kids, everything, exhaustion. And I was just kind of like, okay, I'm going to come. My friends offered to drive, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to come just because I just need 2 days off with no little people needing me to do anything, just me, and kind of rest and relax and switch off. I was desperate for it. And anyway, so as it turned out, on this little tiny mini festival, there was a barn, and there was a gorgeous lady in this barn, which I will find one day. I don't even know her name, but I will do some research and find her so that I can thank her. Because I went for this Reiki, and the second I laid down and she put her hands on me, it was like, for me, it was just like this. Wow. Like my entire being knew that this, whatever this was exactly what I needed. It was, my love for Reiki was born right there. And then I was like, oh my goodness, I need to be able to do this for myself. And as the universe works, I met my Reiki master that year and did it for myself. And the journey went on and on from there. But that very first initial hit of Reiki for me, and I didn't know anything about the mitochondria at that point. I didn't know anything about Reiki at that point. I just know from just a being point of view that was exactly what my body needed in that moment, and still needs on a daily basis now today. So yeah, that was massive feedback for me. So I hope you've got some little idea. Oh, one more that I want to throw in, because I want you to play with this. So if you drive, as you're driving past people, I think I've already mentioned this with my tattoo, and I kind of go, but as you're driving along, so you'll notice, you'll be more aware now anyway. So if you're driving along and you notice someone's just toddling along, and the shoulders are heavy and the bags are weighing them down, and you can see that it's way more than the bags that are weighing them down. They just are weighed down. We can harmlessly, without permission, lovingly just blast them with just a little blaster, just to give them a little, even just a minute, just a moment of, and we can do that in a simple intention. Just let that love go, let a blast. So I use this. You don't need a tattoo. I can just go, that's my instant sending a blast. So I want you to play with this as well. As you drive past or walk past people, do that intentionally, sending them with a little blast of energy. You're not breaking any rules. We're not rooting in their energy. We're just sending them a gorgeous bit of love and gorgeous universal life energy for a second or a minute. And then look, so if you're driving, send it, and then just look back in your mirror, because I love doing this. And what you will notice, this is the feedback, you will notice that that person has got a little bit less weight of the world on their shoulders. Have fun practicing and playing and exploring with this, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye.